Well, welcome back to BookIt. We're still interviewing author Wayne Kuhn about his new book, Recharge, and we're peddling our way right through this book, Wayne, getting ourselves up to speed on this. In the earlier sessions, we've talked about how people do need to have a charge, and that they've got positives and negatives going through their lives, and how there's a need to keep those positives and negatives set in the right direction. And in the last episode, we talked about your kitchen table and how the ideas you picked up as well from early on in your life up until more recently, the ideas you picked up around the kitchen table had a great deal of influence on what you were doing. So that's kind of where we're starting from. But I mentioned at the end of our last episode that today we're going to talk about an idea called the box. And before I start delving into questions about that, I'm just going to ask you to give us a sort of a little bit of a sketch of what it is that you mean by the box.
The box. Well, the box, actually, I created this box because when I was speaking on stage, I was looking for a visual, and the idea of the box was, and somebody says, visualize your mind, and I had trouble with that. I thought, well, what do I do with that, And so I thought, well, if your box was like your mind, then we can put things in it and we can take things out. And so I thought, okay, let's call this the box. This is basically a replication of your mind. What's in your mind, and what's usually in your mind is your thoughts, your experiences, what has, the good, the bad, your programming. It's all the things, all the knowledge that all the pieces that you're dealing with are in your mind. And so here we are, we have a box full of stuff. And that's where the kitchen table started, is all the things we learned from the kitchen table are in our box. And now, as we live life, we go to university, we put more things in the box. We get married, we put more things in the box. We have kids, we put more things in the box. And so this box gets more and more busier and more and fills up with all the things that are in life. And I think the important thing is to remember that we like to think that all the good stuff is in the box, but there's also all the bad stuff. So there's things in your box that will help you get to where you want to go, and there's things in your box that'll hold you back. There's people in your box that'll help you get ahead in life, and there's people that'll hold you back. And so it's almost like a realization of getting to know who you are, be aware of what's in your box, knowing your limitations, and then of course, knowing where you want to go. And that's one of the phrases. Most people, like, here we are today, and we dream of being a rocket scientist or whatever, but there's always that thing, and sometimes it's the box that's sitting in between of where we want to be or where we want to go. And so we have to really analyze what's in our box. And the aha, I think that I gathered from this is most people don't know what's in their box. They don't have a real good understanding of why they do what they do. And the box contains all our habits. And I think this is the chapter where or maybe I'm jumping ahead, but most of it relates to the box. Okay. Is that everything we do, like when you pick up a pen and write, when you pick up your fork to eat, when you get dressed in the morning, everything we do is a habit. And as much as 75% of what we're doing is unconscious in the box. So if we start looking at things that we do and start watching ourselves do them, then we start to realize what we need to do with the stuff in the box. And always encourage people to look forward rather than back, because looking around the kitchen table is looking back, and you can get bogged down and get into blame game, excuses, and all that stuff by looking back. Say, oh, I'm cheap because my parents were cheap and that's what they taught me. Yeah, okay, no, you want to look forward. So I want to be a different type of person. What's that person look like? And what do I need to put in my box to achieve that? Yeah, it's interesting.
It's interesting. When I was reading through your book, there's a subtitle that says "Outside the Box," and immediately my brain went to when I've been in these these brainstorming groups, and they say, okay, folks, we want you to think outside the box. But that wasn't where you were going at all. You were talking about the influences in your life that start outside your box. You've got your box of all the experiences you have and what your mind is thinking about right now. But tell us a little bit about what you realized is coming to you from outside of your box.
Well, certainly, and the influences, again, is the influences on our mind are always there, and again, they're external. So I guess I talk about that outside the box and what is controlling us, and very oftentimes it's our past programming. There are physical restraints that do control us. Like, some of us have financial restraints because of the job we have. Some of them, I think one thing I'm cautious of when I talk to people is that we all have responsibilities. So it's not a matter of just throwing everything away and going and doing whatever you want, because there are responsibilities. Like if you have a young family, those are your responsibilities, and you can't walk away from that just because you're following a dream. So there's things that are outside the box that are fixed. Maybe we'll call them fixed attributes that we need to respect and keep in mind as we move ahead. Not that they hold you back, but that they become part of your plan. And also the influences are, like I mentioned, people. Like sometimes there's people in our lives that aren't in tune with what we want to be. I have friends that I sometimes think maybe I've outgrown them, because as we learn and as we move ahead, if you have influences that are no longer in harmony with where you want to go, and then they will start to hold you back. And so you have a decision to make. Either I stop or I need to release. And I talk a bit of that in one of the chapters about, but how do you unfriend, or how do you let go of somebody, that's just sucking the energy out of you or dragging you back. Yeah.
We've all met people like that. You also talk about in the context of the box about making new habits, and the idea that a lot of our habits come from inside that box, that mindset that you have. Can you talk a little bit about the idea of making new habits?
Well, new habits are interesting because I don't know if because we do things so much kind of an automatic mode that first of all, if we want to change something, we have to realize what we're doing initially. One of the examples I read is next time you pull your pants on in the morning, put the other leg in and see how it feels. And you go, oh, this isn't right. Or when you cross your arms, try crossing your arms the other way. All of a sudden you go, oh, you have to consciously do that, because normally we just automatically cross our arms. But if you do it the other way, you have to think. So when you form new habits, you have to kind of stop the world and say, what do I want to do? What can I do differently? I remember my wife says to me, don't cross your legs as much, because apparently when you cross your legs, you cut off the circulation in your legs, and that's not healthy. So those are things that I have to consciously stop doing, and be aware of it all the time. Now, when I form new habits, business-wise, I have exercises that I talk about later in the book, as far as how do you start a new habit? Like, and again, it's consciousness. Sometimes it's writing it down. Sometimes it's having it blatantly in front of you all the time. And eventually, it will become more natural and become part of you. I'm from the old school. I remember, 35 years ago, I used to smoke. If anybody's ever smoked, how hard it was to break that habit. Some say, well, you're addicted. Yeah, okay, it was addicted, but it really tasted good after a coffee or with a coffee. So what do? You stop having the coffee, and all of a sudden you broke the habit and think, well, can't have a coffee without a cigarette. So all of a sudden I've stopped smoking. Why'd you stop smoking? Well, it didn't go with the coffee, So you change your routine and you change your habits. And that's a big piece in moving forward in becoming who we really want to be, because we have to let go of some of the old habits. Yeah.
And I talked a few minutes ago about the idea of thinking outside the box, and it's not that you didn't work with that idea, you just left it till a little later, until we'd gotten more familiar with the idea of the box. But you do talk about thinking outside of the box, and this is where I love the metaphor of the box, because it really does give you the clear visualization of what thinking outside the box means. And maybe you can talk a little bit about where ideas come from for you, and where ideas that are not maybe from within your box come from.
Well, this is it, and it's like the box is constantly being fed with new ideas, as far as whether you're in school or life's experiences. Every time I meet or courses you take, and I believe that part of the being recharged, part of the recharge movement that I want to create is education. Like, people need to constantly be learning new things, and what you'll find is when you're fully charged and you live in a higher mindset, your mind is curious, and you'll always be bringing new things in and from outside the box. One of the things that I really struggled with is, in my early years, that when people would say, well, think outside the box, I confuse that with reducing your morals. In other words, just because, say, what would be something that you believe strongly, and maybe let's take something controversial like abortion. You may totally disagree with abortion, but now if you think outside the box, you would agree with abortion, and so sometimes people mix that up, in that just because you're thinking outside the box doesn't mean that you change your values. If you have strong beliefs in a certain area, it doesn't mean you change those beliefs. It means that you widen up and you look at other possibilities. And I think about that in business. We are constantly told to be thinking outside the box. But as a human being, as a person of integrity, doesn't mean that I take my values that are in the box and throw them out the door. People say, well, when you're filling out your income tax, are you
just
still,
given me a
yeah.
You've just given me an idea here, and because later on in the chapter also you're talking about the idea of not closing the box, the idea of keeping your mind open to different ways of doing things, different approaches. Can you think of an example from your sales career, for example, where you started doing things a little differently and got better success because you went outside of the normal way that you did things and you tried something a little different? Have you ever had
Well,
that
I think
experience?
if I can share with you my paradigm, in that in that I've always felt, because of my table experience and what was in my box, is generosity was not a trait that I was strong with. And so what happened is, in business, you've heard this, the term, you have to give to get, sort of thing. And you don't do it with the expectation of getting back, but you provide good service. And I think that's where I had to consciously, and I don't know if this is answering your question, but I had to be very conscious about being generous. In other words, doing things for people, going that extra mile. And I found in the sales business, in business, people see you go the extra mile. You become special and different than a lot of other people. And so you add that piece to your box of generosity, and all of a sudden you open new doors and new possibilities. And those are all again high thinking. Those are all high level mindset attributes that I think are very beneficial. Yeah.
Wayne, I really want to thank you for this image of the box, because you sort of wrap up the chapter talking about the idea of things that we do when we're thinking of a certain thing. Like you think about rolling up your sleeves as very, very symbolic of getting down to work and making things happen. And when you're rolling up your sleeves, that's what you're doing, that's from your box. There you go. And that's from inside your box. So I think that's a terrific way to go, and a terrific approach to take when you're looking at what you're going to do in the future.
Awesome.
In our next episode, we're going to talk about the idea of thoughts creating feelings. And as a sales trainer, I've said to people in the past, never ask your customer what they think, because very often they're not very good at thinking. And it's because in school these days, we're not taught how to think. We're taught what to think. Mm-hmm. But people, while they may not know what they think, they do know what they feel. Mm-hmm. And so when I teach salespeople, I ask them, ask your customer, do you feel that this is going to give you the results you want? And you're going to get an answer then. Whereas if you say, do you think, they're going to go, well, let me think. And they may not be able to come up with something right on the spot, but they do know what they feel. And this is, so when I saw this title, Thoughts Creating Feelings, I thought, wow, that sort of ties the two together. And we'll get into that in our next session. But just folks, I just want to remind you, we've been talking to Wayne Kuhn about his new book, Recharge. This is a book you can pick up through Amazon, and Wayne and myself are both happy to help you connect with the book. But you got to get this book, because it's really it's a worthwhile read. And we're exploring some of the ideas in it right now, but you'll get a lot more if you have it in your hand and you're reading it. Wayne, thanks very much for your time today.